This is the Cleveland Real Estate Investor Podcast. On this episode, Mike Reilly of Reilly Properties and Mike Ferrante of Century 21 talk about what time of year is the best time to put your house on the market.
All right, hi everybody. It's the new year, the new decade, 2020. With me is my comrade in the real estate arms, Mike Ferrante, calling in remote from the comfort of his man cave, and you got your fireplace going, Mike?
That's right, calling from the satellite office in Twinsburg.
Now, the satellite office, you mean like your den or your office?
Yeah, pretty much. But the home office in Twinsburg is where I get most of my work done. So we're located in Solon. That's where the corporate office is. But I work a lot from home, where I've got everything I need to do what I do.
Including the remote, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, listen, our topic today in early January is there a good time to sell your house? And ironically enough, January, even though it's cold, can be a very hot time to sell a house. You want to elaborate, Mike?
Oh, no, that's a great way to put it. So I get this question all the time. I'll meet people and they'll say, oh, well, I want to wait until May or June when there's more buyers in the market. And certainly it's true that more homes are sold during the summer months. But the reality is that January, February, March, and April can be fantastic months to sell because there's less competition. The analogy I make is that, well, everyone drives downtown during rush hour, so that must be the best time to go. Well, not necessarily, because there's more competition. Selling houses is the same way. Is the summer best? Not necessarily. Maybe January to April because there's less.
Right, exactly. Now, the other thing is, don't you have a kind of a different type of buyer that migrate into the market in January?
Yes, you're 100% right, Mike. You never cease to amaze me with your real estate knowledge.
Even though I'm not a realtor.
Well, you're even better than a realtor. You've got boots on the ground knowledge, like that boots on the ground degree or license. But yeah, you're absolutely right. When we are taking buyers out in January and February, you better believe those are serious buyers. We don't get tire kickers running around in January shopping for houses. These are people that really want or need to move. So the combination of limited inventory, motivated buyers, it really paints a good picture for sellers. One study I read said that February, this was a National Association of Realtors study, said that February was the best month for sellers as it relates to list price to sale price ratio.
Wow. It makes a lot of sense because one of the dirty little secrets in your industry is the tire kickers. I mean, these people just love going around looking at houses, and the poor realtor is almost, he's not going to be selling anything because they have no intention of buying anything. They're just looking.
And then, it's not good for anybody. These folks that really don't intend on buying, they're wasting everyone's time. Think about the sellers too. Sure, I like to feel sorry for us, but these sellers, they get out of their home for an hour or two, they get everything ready. They clean everything. They get excited. Oh, hey, we have a showing. And then, if they knew that they were going through all this for someone who wasn't a serious buyer, they'd be pretty upset. And unfortunately, that's what you go through when you sell your house. You have to put a sign in the yard, a lockbox, and let strangers in your home. And it's just, one of those things. So that's why, we always preach to our teammates and our peers that we really want to know that you've got serious buyers lined up.
Well, now we get back to that January, February. I mean, who's going to go out on a cold, wet, snowy night to look at houses unless they really have to get a house?
I agree 100%. Yeah.
Okay, now, what do you do for in January to make sure that the house doesn't blow up on you? I mean, we've had this problem in the past, and listeners out there should be aware, if you've moved out of the house and it's vacant, you better make sure that A, the water's turned off, and B, the heat is on, but doesn't have to be on, 80 degrees. But it needs to be on about, 60 degrees, so the pipes don't freeze. But the backstop to make sure that water's turned off, because you actually may have faucets in pipes in areas that don't get a lot of insulation, inside garages or outside faucets have the old school, water faucets. You want to add your 2 cents?
Yeah, well, third floor bathrooms. I mean, I know which one you're thinking of. We had a house in University Heights that we were selling, and we had the heat on, but unbeknownst to us, the boiler stopped working, and next thing you know, that third floor toilet pipe froze and broke and caused a ton of damage. And that's why it's our policy whenever we're in control of that we make sure the water main is turned off. It's kind of a catch-22 because when you have buyers walking through the house, you'd sure like them to be able to flush the toilets and run the sinks. But the reality is that here in Cleveland, it's more practical. It's more beneficial to have that water turned off. The other thing is, you mentioned 60 degrees, and that's what I usually do. But you have to remember in those areas that maybe get a little less heat, like a third floor, sometimes 60 degrees won't quite cut it.
Yeah.
So you think, I got my heat on, but still that pipe might freeze and you're in trouble.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is with a boiler, you can't shut the water off. You got to keep the water on, the main, because the boiler needs the water. And we learned that at a couple properties, in my early years of, contracting sold houses. But, boy, I tell you,
those fill valves. But, the other thing you can do, at least it limits the, amount of damage that gets done. Usually there are shutoff valves to other parts of the house. So maybe you leave the water onto the boiler, which is in the basement, so that's usually protected from freezing, but you turn off all the peripheral valves so that your first and second floor is not getting water.
Right.
And hey, if you do have a pipe break and it's near the boiler, it's not good, but at least you're not having water pour through 3 stories of a house.
Right. I think the other thing to keep in mind is there is other preventative measures that you can do. One is to actually put a little antifreeze into, the toilet.
The traps.
The traps, exactly. And the second thing is actually to run a little water, like drip, drip, drip.
Yeah.
Keep that water
that's
going.
Right.
But I think when people are getting ready to list the house, let's say they're down south in Florida, you really should be working not just with a realtor, but with a contracting company like ourselves, who are going to be monitoring the house periodically, showing some activity, maybe a smart home with Alexa or Nest, where you're the lights are going on, the heat's being monitored, you can check on it remotely. But these are things to be aware of, in that pre-spring market sale. The other thing I want to add is, and we've got a couple properties that we're teeing up for listing in January, and people don't realize that can you paint a house in January and February? And the answer is, surprisingly, yes, you can, as long as we're not dealing with a super severe winter. Most days, most of the time, like, for example, this week, we had a couple days, it was sunny, it was 40, maybe 38, 45. Tomorrow it's going to be 60, and then Monday, Tuesday next week it's going to be, close to 50. You can get in and out of a house pretty quickly using the new generation paints. Give the house a quick cleanup, wash the windows, maybe get those dead leaves cleaned up. What else do you do? I know we talked about this earlier in a podcast, Mike, but your checklist of what you want to do to stage a house.
Well, so number one, it's all about that first impression. The old saying, never get a second chance to make a first impression. So, you pull up to the house, you imagine you're the buyer or the agent with the buyer, and what's the first thing you see? And you're always quick to point out, the windows, the siding, the lawn, so
the front entryway.
Yeah, exactly. So even in winter, I know you mentioned painting and cleaning and whatnot, but how about mulch? We can still get mulch, and if there's no snow covering those beds and they look like bad, we got to clean up the leaves and put a fresh layer of mulch down.
I had a guy, and he actually may be listening to this podcast, but he's got a 6,000 square foot house, and he was looking to get $100 a square foot. So he had it up there about a year and a half ago at $600,000, and he had a realtor, old school realtor, handling it, and that thing was not moving. In fact, that after a year and a half, the price was down to $425, which is unbelievable. I mean, the house had a pool, it's beautiful kitchen, stuff like that. And he called me up, and I went over there and took a look at it, and I thought to myself, no wonder this price has collapsed. The front of the house, big mansion, looked terrible. He was cutting the grass himself. There's no edge lines. There's bare spots. There's the beds look moldy, and the whole front of the house was peeling. And and what happened was he finally got an offer at $425, and then to make matters worse, they brought in a home inspector, who then proceeded to beat him up for another $10,000-$15,000. Because they thought, well, it's been on the market for a year and a half. Why don't we just keep, piling on, beat the guy up, keep lowering the price? He's probably desperate to sell. So go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, Mike, one of the most important things is you have to think like a buyer when you're getting ready to sell your house. So one of the things is you have to go through the house with a qualified contractor like yourself and anticipate what these home inspectors are going to find. So if they find a couple little things, that's fine. But when they come up with a 10-page laundry list, that really scares buyers, and they think, gosh, if it's this bad, in quotes, because really the house isn't bad, but most of these inspectors are trying to justify their fees and really just become alarmist. But if you can get rid of 2/3 of that list or 90% of that list before the inspector even walks in the door, you're that much ahead of the game. So even little stupid things like smoke detector batteries, light bulbs, door stops, these are things that we look for once we get inside, and they're minor. The cost is minimal, but the difference is immense.
Well, I would suspect that if you're in hot areas like New York, LA, where you're always getting multiple offers as soon as a house comes on the market, there are not a lot of home inspectors out there making money because if you're a seller and you put the house on the market and you're getting multiples over list, you know what? You're yawning if somebody says, "Well, I want to bring an inspector," right?
Yeah, they just go to offer number 2 if they don't like what you ask them for. Now that said, Mike, even in hot markets like Solon here in our area, we had a house that went under contract in 3 days, and they brought in a home inspector. I think that regardless, your buyers who are spending hundreds of thousands on a house, they're going to protect that investment by having a $300 to $500 home inspection. They'd be fools not to.
Yeah,
now,
but shouldn't
they have leverage on you after? They may or may not, depending on your position as a seller. But they still want to know that if they're paying $350,000, $500,000 for a house, that they're not inheriting more than they anticipated. So
right. I think
it mean that the deal dies.
Yeah, but this is where it's one thing if somebody says there's a toxic waste dump behind the house or something really alarming. But on the other hand, if you got a guy nickel and diming or bringing up stuff, the people have been there for 10 years, they haven't had a problem, and this guy is almost like Inspector Clouseau, he's just ruining the deal. You really do have to go to offer number 2, offer number 3. I mean, right?
Absolutely.
I mean,
absolutely. I mean, the purpose of the home inspection is not to make a honey-do list for the seller. The purpose is to protect the buyer from making a foolish investment. So if they make an offer and it's accepted, and the inspector notices, let's say a basement wall that's bowing, that's going to be $8,000 to fix, and no one ever noticed it, or no one's been in the attic in 10 years and they go up there and it's a mold farm. You've got an attic full of mold that no one ever noticed because the bathroom exhaust has been pumping moist air into the attic for the last 10 years. Those are the types of things that inspectors, should be noting and are, worthy of discussion. But this outlet isn't wired right. I mean, come on, that's like little maintenance stuff that isn't worthy of really making a big fuss over after an inspection.
Right. Now, okay, final question. Let's sum up where we are. January and February, hot months for serious buyers. Great time to put your house on the market, number one. Number two, curb appeal, make that strong first impression. 3, don't get intimidated by an inspector and be prepared to walk if they're nickel and diming you for the next offer. And let's finalize this pod with number 4. How do you think, going forward, the market's going to be in the next 6 to 9 months?
I love that question. So, no one knows, and anyone who says they know for sure this or that's going to happen, no one really knows. But that said, we all think that the strong start to the year is going to continue through the year. The Fed probably isn't going to make any significant changes to interest rates, and we think that 2020 is going to be pretty strong. Now, that said, after the election, maybe some things might start changing, and you might see 2021 be the beginning of a new recession. But the interesting thing about that question, Mike, is that it shouldn't be scaring anyone away from real estate, because the next recession we have, and there is one coming eventually, it always does, it's not going to be driven by the real estate market like the recession of 2008. So you're going to see maybe the stock market will dip. It goes up and down. That's normal. But you're going to see people looking at real estate as, once again, the, quote, safe investment, because it is. Only with the exception of 2008, during recessions, real estate doesn't tank. So right. I don't think anyone should really be afraid of values dipping again. But certainly things will slow down when the recession hits. So if you're thinking about selling, 2020 is the year, man, because who knows what 2021 is
right.
bringing.
I've been telling people who have been on the fence about, they think, well, we know we have to downside. I would say 2020 is when you need to exit. Because we could get into an overheated economy, and we could start seeing some bubbles in certain markets. But I agree with you. I think 2020 is with low interest rates, and inventory is not. I mean, inventory is low,
it's
right?
Still low. It's still low, but as all markets do, they even out over time, and the builders are building furiously. So combine that with inventory beginning to creep up.
Yeah.
It's gonna even the market out. You brought up rates. I was wondering, what do you think about rates? They can't stay low forever, right?
Well, that's a whole. Let's save that for another topic.
All right, yeah, that's a whole other half hour. We put our Ben Bernanke or Alan Greenspan, God forbid, hats on. See who the smart guy is and who the dunce is. So we'll end on that note. So stay tuned for our next podcast later in the week. Thanks, Mike. Excellent. Always enjoy it. Thanks for having me.
Okay.
Thank you for listening to the Cleveland Real Estate Investor Podcast. To listen to our other episodes, go to www.reilly-properties.com.